Welcome to the Dave Show Midstream Reading Series. My name is Richard Terrill. I have a co-host tonight, Don Brunnquell. He'll be coming to you halfway through. I have another commitment. I'm double booked. If you care to go out in the cold and wind and you're in the Twin Cities, my band is playing at the Speakeasy Volstead's Emporium starting at 9. Come and say hello. If you're a first-time visitor to our readings and you'd like to be on the mailing list to get the Zoom invitation for future readings, go to our website, midstreamreadingseries.wordpress.com. Readings take place the second Thursday of each month. And on the website, you'll also find YouTube links to previous readings and in a few days to this reading, if you want to pass that information on to a friend. Before we get any further, I want to thank Paul Matties, who's running tech for us again tonight. And through these last 2 years, none of this would have happened without Paul. And so we owe him our thanks. I've suggested to the 4 readers tonight that if they like, they can put links in the chat to their books, how you can buy their books. If you miss that, or if they don't do that, you know how to find them online. So if you hear something you like, buy books and buy these books. We also have a chat open. You can, if you like, add comments about the readings. And an announcement. Midstream would like, if possible, this summer to go back to face-to-face events. The problem is we need a venue. We no longer have a venue. So if you have a suggestion for us, please put it in the chat, or you can email me. I put my email address in the chat if you have an idea of a place that might sponsor us, might let us have our reading there once a month. We need to have a commitment to the same night each month, not necessarily Thursday. We can switch if we have to. We would need seating probably for 30 at least, a decent mic and sound, since we don't have a sound system, we don't have any money. And we were hoping that the parking wouldn't be too tough. A central location would be nice, but maybe not required. We can't ask for the moon and the stars. So if you have an idea, we've been working on it too. We've got a list of possible places, but we're looking for suggestions. Okay, so please consider that. So a short poem before we have our first reader. I consider this a spring poem, which we desperately need, even though spring is only mentioned in one line of the poem. It's an old poem from my first book, Coming Late to Rachmaninoff. The possibility of love occurs to us like a new color, like the idea to write a letter, occurs like the morning of the accident. The possibility of love rises like a blanket shook out after a day at the beach. The possibility of love is a child. It's spring in the mind of one red bird. Other possibilities make you stop and go. The possibility of love is a working vacation. It's a campaign without a manager, a campaign with no election. It is no campaign at all. In Wisconsin in the 1950s, wives in long jackets and bright work dresses ran damp cloths along clotheslines. Blue clouds blew by. What the wives hung out to dry was the possibility of love. Our first reader tonight is Mary Jo Thompson. Her first poetry collection, Stunt Heart, was selected by Henri Cole for the Backwaters Poetry Prize, published in 2018. Her work has appeared in many journals: North American Review, The Journal, Missouri Review, Field, Prairie Schooner, Rhino, Indiana Review, Carolina Quarterly, Spillway, and Beloit Poetry Journal, among others. It's anthologized in Best American Poetry and in Another and Another, an anthology from the Grind Daily Writing Series. She's been awarded residencies at Monson Arts and the Vermont Studio Center to work on a hybrid memoir that explores marriage as transaction. Thompson lives with her dog Pico on Nicollet Island. Mary Jo Thompson.
Thank you so much, Richard, and hello, everybody. I love that Richard picked the poem he did because my poems about, like, marriage as transaction need an antidote, and that was a great antidote. The poem was beautiful. Thank you. So tonight, first of all, thank you so much for taking time to be here. I really am glad you're here. I'm working on that project, like I mentioned in my bio, that has to do with marriage. It started as a book of poetry, and it had kind of the echoes between a first marriage and marriages that happened in my ancestry line hundreds of years ago that I happened to come upon. So just that as preface, I'm going to get started. At the dentist, you admire your jawbone on the X-ray film, its mottled base and patched stockade. Take in the fort of your skull, and you are archaeological. You can't help but think of the day you'll be deadheading your own funeral spray, the day you become the latest ancestor, headstoned near the greats and great-greats, that trapper, the lumberman, the many farmers, and their lovely wives. A little muddled, you can hear them invite you for spirits and revelry at a once lively tavern that stood eternally catty-corner to the church. They sound like geese, tongues bared and hissing, but you can't reply. Your mouth is wide open, its laughing gasped tongue anesthetized into silence. Though you're gargling anyway. Go ahead, I'll catch up. So a friend of mine, I took a course with her recently online. She was my teacher also, and she called the course, Remember When We Talked About the Future. And I had to say, I try not to talk about the future or think about it. And the older I get, the less I want to do that because there's so much less future than there is past. And so this is a focused book on the past. Here's the next thought about that. Memory of cherry blossoms. In a lab, unwitting mice skitter towards scents of cherry blossoms to test whether terror passes down the family tree. Zap! They're trained via pain against a saccharine smell. And do later babies, theirs, also shy away from the cherry blossom? Yes. They flee without a zap, though mother's DNA came through to them unchanged. What instructs them then? To be born with dread. How does the suffering mother alert her unborn child? Run, make no sound, do not cry out. For the child knows without knowing about foreboding. What did your people endure? Those ahead of you, what marked them? From my mother's side, I carry incessant dreams of hunger, babies dying, and fear of giving birth. From my father's side, the innate belief that even now I disappoint you. Coming to terms. Schoolgirl on her bike pedals the hard hill past roadside daisies, faces caked with dust. The block where she lives is the whole world until the tires baver, skid on gravel. When she falls, her right arm scrapes the tar like a plow blade. Breath gone out, she sees a figure. Glimpse of what? Grandfather? Drunk? Dead from tumble down basement stairs? Her Siamese cat, stiff, tossed against the curb. That boy, cancer of the glands. Please, untangle her from the frame of the bike. She has not understood. Let her bones mend, bruises pale. Let her play, toss and catch a few more years without taking full weight. And let her fall without landing. So this is getting into the teenage years more. Okay, kith. I thought you said kiss or kit. Maybe you were speaking Spanish from Spain, but then I heard it correctly. Kith, as in kith and kin, friends and relations. Kin, as in bairn, as in clan, as in tribe. To make my love known to you, I kith you. Now, please make me your kin. Firsts. What I remember best about the wedding was that afterward I was eating smoked salmon and it swam on my plate. It was going the way of all salmon, a grown-up's exhausted expression on its face, though movement in the tail showed the inborn commitment to leap hors d'oeuvres and get back to the source. Within minutes, there were only bones, a scattering of scales, a tail next to the towering wedding castle, carrot cake, naturally. 3 tears. I never smashed one sweet piece of it in my husband's mouth, since it was before meanness and we scoffed at tradition. I wore a yellow gingham dress, no lace, and the wedding communion was whole grain. Our priest, released from jail that morning, having chained himself to a munitions train, would leave the church a few months later, marry the nun who carried "out now" on a sign. My mother maintained this mass was ersatz, and that's why it never took. I can't recall if she was relieved or ashamed about the pronouncement kiss, our respective quivers before enmeshing in a longer and deeper than decorous clench. But we weren't that invested in our vows, did she guess? We kept quiet about how fast our marriage fell asleep once nothing was clandestine. Here's another wedding story. We became our family's first divorce. Thankfully, we were childless, though everyone's Titanic innocence had been punctured by the iceberg in our champagne punch. In the wedding photos, my freckles beg forgiveness. My dark eyes rummage the distance for the real wife. And to conclude this little section, and then I'll do a couple from the ancient section. This one's called Vinyl Record. I slide the disc out of its tattered cover, hum and remember living with you, how we collected our spins, melodic beginnings on vinyl. Ba-dum bumps so holy, they washed us into bed. I took a job at the movies, projecting ideas 12 feet tall, waitressed, but couldn't take the music. Elevator songs about highways and jet planes, I had to pay the rent. When I drove away after 7 years, I passed fields of sunflowers so ready, they dropped their heads. We had trailed apart a little at a time, like fence posts, love. I've had years now with all my own tracks, but the music of you stays between my ribs, needle to worn groove. I re-love our sound. So these ancestors were French, and they were women called filles du roi. They were sent to populate. You'll hear that in this piece. So the prelude is 21st century rain. I should have been timing. Let's see. I think I have a few more minutes. Yeah. 21st century rain. A woman in my compartment worries climate change drowns our summer. Breton's chalk cliffs are dissolving, she laments, and shows me grainy pixels, the shin bones of a medieval monk rained from his grave. I am also wistful about constancy. Today in Normandy, I seek crumbled walls and crooked windows in the towns where my vassal grandmothers divorced their maiden lives. At the next stop, I'll walk to a dike, once a salt marsh, write about field work and wooden ships. I'm tracking down the wellsprings of my lineage, and my hiking boots leak in the mud. I plan to pay €6 for a ticket to a museum where a mummified bog woman lies displayed, bronze-colored but intact, her leather cap tied beneath her chin, a slight turn at her lip, as if something of her long life stays stowed away inside her. So the crossing. They went by sea, a sore love remaining after home was gone, a sheet flapping, though there was no wind. Over time, what went lacking was all that they had. That is to say, they had their longing. So I'll finish with, I have the female poem. I'll read it fast. So this is a couple that are featured. And I'll start with her. The arrangement. Francois Beauvin, age 15, arrives at Laos. I don't speak French, by the way. And so I'm going to massacre a few things. Arrives at l'Hospital de la Salpêtrière. The priest has seen her at prayer, wide shoulders, muscled forearms, potential. The campaign, Brides for a New World's Army, is on his mind. The girl's parents have died. Only she needs accept the king's offer and make her mark, agreeing to 50 livres if she marries a soldier, 100 if she marries an officer. The nuns will sew her 2 homespun gowns. When a chest arrives from court, she shall unpack adornments for her hair, a taffeta handkerchief, 1 pair of silk ribbons, 100 sewing needles, a comb, and a spool of white thread. In the month that comes, more, a pair of stockings and gloves, 1 scissors, 2 knives, 1,000 pins, a cotton bonnet, and 2 more silver livres. A long cordon hat made of skins await the Breton girl if she makes the passage. And she does make the passage in a kind of speed dating from the 17th century in the nuns' quarters in Montreal. She signs up with the guy named, who's my 7th great-grandfather, Louis Lamoureux. So this is called The Affectionate Louis Lamoureux. And the epigraph is their listing in the 1681 census. Louis Lamoureux arrives in 1662, registers at the Hotel Dieu. He's 23. To pay his way, he helps erect a palisade against the Iroquois. He joins the gang that builds the church, longs for the advent of his old god on the new continent. He is appointed tax collector and receives 2 acres on the town's rear fief. Comes into the graces of Lord Lemoyne and by extension, King Louis XIV. A great businessman, Louis Lamoureux, trades land for money, money for land. A wife will be an important purchase. He sells 40 acres to a man just arrived from Cannes. With new silver, he sachets into the convent to meet the king's girls, the ones who have been shipped from France under obligation to wed. He wants to be chosen. He wants a ribbon of land touching the St. Lawrence and an island parcel and islets or islets. He likes to wheel and deal. He will have them, along with Francois Beauvin, Louis the lover, an affectionate man. He makes many children, buys islands for each of them. And so from my island, named for a French explorer here in Minneapolis, I say thank you. That is the end of my reading. Thank you.
That was Mary Jo Thompson. A native of Chicago, Philip S. Bryant is the author of 3 previous collections of poetry: Blue Island, Sermon on a Perfect Spring Day, and Stompin' at the Grand Terrace, a jazz memoir in verse, with music by Carolyn Wilkins. His work has appeared in Blues Vision, African American Writing from Minnesota, Good Poems, American Places, selected and introduced by Garrison Keillor, and Where One Voice Ends, Another Begins, 150 Years of Minnesota Poetry. Selections from Stompin' at the Grand Terrace were chosen by Los Angeles Times music critic Ann Powers to appear in Best Music Writing 2010. His latest full collection of poetry, The Promised Land, Noden Press 2018, received the Benjamin Franklin Award, silver winner, as a finalist in the poetry category from the Independent Book Publishers Association. He's a professor of English and African Studies at Gustavus Adolphus College, where he holds the Hanson Peterson Endowed Chair of Liberal Studies. Philip S. Bryant.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Mary. I'm going to start with a spring poem, Richard, a little short one. And this is the title poem of Sermon on a Perfect Spring Day. And not so perfect. Oh, there's snow on the ground now. Okay, I'm going to read this. Open your minds and heart to God, the preacher said in closing. Gladiolas, someone shouted from the back pews. Gladiolas. All right. I'm going to read a poem, The Glue That Held Everything Together. And this is a poem that it's dated, so it's more than, it goes back more than a half century. So it was when America was great, right? And so I'm going to read this. The glue that held everything together. We were all stuck to the same glue in 1967, sticky as rolls of fly paper, and we didn't know it yet. To us, our world was coming up roses. Chicago Vocational had just won the Public League football championship with big Polacks from Hegewisch, Bohunks from Blue Island, and swift-footed colored boys from the South Side. And we were all shit and grit in our shops, pinging and panging the industrial rag that would send us either to the blast furnace of Gary or Vietnam. For some, it was their salad days, hair greased back Dago style, tight black Levi jeans, and a cigarette dangling like a crucifix from their mouths. No one would tell us we were stuck on this deserted island for the rest of our lives, and there wasn't no use in trying to get out either. So we buzzed over our souped up cars and looked forward to annual 3% raises. The tiny ramshackle bungalows were built below the smoky mills that called us even then. As we stretched out our wings on Saturday night to impress our girls, as fledglings often do, as if to fly off with them somewhere. But the glue that held everything together back then, hardened fast as cement. We flapped and flapped, but our wings got us nowhere. I'm going to read a couple of musician poems. Since Rich is here, and this is called Press, and that was Lester Young's nickname that was given to him by Billie Holiday, and it was short for president of the tenor saxophone. So this is called Press. Lester's sound insinuated that there would always be a door somewhere that we'd find already unlocked if we ever tried to open it. And the second one is another jazz musician, and I feel legend. He's actually originally from St. Louis, East St. Louis. He was a trumpet player, Lester Bowie. He played in a very important jazz group called the Art Ensemble of Chicago, and he was part of the AACM, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians, which was started in the late 1960s in Chicago as well. This is Lester Bowie. Today it's dead calm. A pale white mist covers this sleepy southern Minnesota town. Earlier this morning, golden yellow bands of thick clouds spread one atop the other across the horizon, like a musical measure where notes are played, then erased and forgotten forever. This morning, though, I think of you, a fade hairdo, wire-rimmed glasses, Fu Manchu goatee and mustache, a spotless white lab coat, supine gold lame necktie, holding your great golden trumpet high to the sky, like Dizzy once used to do on salt peanuts, about to blow the first impeccable note, which suddenly brings the sun up. And Lester Bowie, I know Rich knows, would wear this lab coat because he would say every time we get on the stage, he was talking about the Art Ensemble of Chicago. We're like laboratory researchers in music. So he got this, he would always come on with this white laboratory, thing when he would play on stage. This is called Emergency Poem, based on a childhood memory from the 1950s. And, some of you may remember that decade. Okay, so emergency poem. This is just a test. If this poem were an actual emergency, you'd be instructed to immediately seek shelter in your basement or your cellar. Go to the far corner, away from all windows, squat down low, put your head between your legs, and kiss your ass goodbye. All right. I'm going to read another poem called Peaches and Cream. This is kind of a food poem, and I dedicate it to my sister, Sean Alexis. And it's about our grandfather, Hampton. Peaches and Cream. Seemingly out of nowhere, I remember our grandfather Hampton's all-time favorite ice cream, peaches and cream. So Sean, was it a Wanzer Milk Company back in the 1950s that made it? Or was it Seal Tests or Borden's? I can't remember which. Maybe it was the time we were at our Bow Junction, Arkansas cousin's tiny farm outside the town of Covert, Michigan, when they cooked up a big batch of Southern fried chicken. Just a few short hours before, that great big platter of golden brown, perfectly fried chicken had been walking around, pecking random bits of seed and corn from off the ground. This was before the Colonel, Popeyes, Church's, or even Harold's famous fried chicken were ever around. There was cornbread, macaroni and cheese, bacon grease, slowly simmered with fresh picked pole beans. And afterwards, for dessert, we had our cousin's homemade ice cream. Remember, you and I turned the crank of that old-fashioned oak wood bucket ice cream maker, turning and churning for hours on end. Our cousins even gave us a silver dollar, real money in those days, to keep the crank going. The ice and salt around cream and home-cooked custard flowing. I seriously thought my arm was going to fall off, but just when it seemed turning the crank was way too hard, our cousin appeared, smiling, with a big bowl of sliced peaches picked that morning from her small orchard. The turning was all downhill then, and it became a soft, luscious peach and cream blend. We churned and turned until all those fresh slices of peaches were churned all the way in. For the topper, our cousin scooped that peaches and ice cream right over a freshly baked slice of her peach cobbler still warm out of the oven. Then I remembered our grandfather Hampton, who had worked so hard with just an 8th grade education to support his entire family. Since he'd been age 11, how he took just a spoonful of the cobbler and peaches and cream, ice cream from his bowl, lifted his head right up to the skies and proclaimed, "This has got to be heaven." He was a man of few words, always quiet and reserved, but we watched his eyes fill up with tears of pure joy and happiness glisten. I remember just as it was then. When Grandfather Hampton spoke, we all looked up from our bowls of peaches and cream ice cream and listened. I'll read another short seasonal poem, and this is called This is the Season. For our middle child whose birthday is tomorrow. So this is the season. Last night it was so cloudy and cold out, but the distant stars, it seemed, were cut down to size for once and placed by Ben, our son, so lovingly around a small tree in our backyard. There a whole constellation shone in the shape of Orion and now burns through the night. For this is the season. The stars can crown bare tree branches, and a young boy can clasp a single star in his mittened hand and string those starry lights far out across this dark, frozen land. And my last poem I'm going to read is from this Poems in the Wake of Racial Injustice Can't Stop, Won't Stop. And it's, I call it Thimby. And Thimby is an album, kind of a famous album by Pharoah Sanders. And it was named to his first wife, Thimby Saunders, and Noma Thimby was a Quaza name that means hope, faith, and love. Thimby. Today I woke up and suddenly thought of Thimby. Who was she? Someone I once knew so briefly way back in the 1960s. First Black girl I ever saw wear beautiful African-style cornrow braids that truly, if you saw them back then, you'd be utterly amazed. By just her hair flowing like long streams of dark shimmering water from a great tropical waterfall on the Congo River, creating a mysterious primeval lighted halo like a multicolored rainbow mist rising up into the air. She could quote Nkrumah, Malcolm, Marx, Fanon, on and on and on, quote long passages from Chancellor Williams, The Destruction of Black Civilization by heart. Her dorm room was adorned and filled up with real wood-carved African sculptures, Southern Black folk art. I remember Thimby dressed in her flowing bhakti print dashiki. Who was she? Where did she go? Faded out of my life like some strange leftover cosmic echo, echoing from far back in my past. And the time that I saw her last, we sat huddled in her small college dorm room, smoking weed, sipping herbal tea, listening to John Coltrane's classic, Africa Brass. Was her name really Thimby? As I look back 50 years and counting, still wondering who was she really? But this long dark shadow in my life, she forever cast, but shone from a once bright warm sun that had long since set and gone down in my past. I remember I couldn't take my eyes off this one tiny, shiny diamond nose stud stuck through her left nostril, glimmering like an angry red star shining from afar, yet steadily settling into the mist, out of reach, out of sight, as I wondered how many light years ago already was the red flickering light. So Thimby, who exactly was she? Always calling me her part-time weekend revolutionary, shortly before she disappeared into one of those big chocolate cities, gone up in flames and vanished forever into those raging fires, along with her name. I wonder if she ever made it out alive, or if I ever see her again. If she was tossed in jail then, or just shot dead, it wouldn't be a surprise. Thimby, what was she? As that quiet, idyllic day drew to a close, with me still not convinced, not willing to join, according to her, that impending Black revolution, which in the end I didn't entirely believe was coming right then, I suppose. I left her standing at the dormitory door, feeling a little ashamed of myself, staring down at the hallway floor. Thimby gave me a long, hard goodbye kiss that made my heart go all aflutter as she whispered into my ear, "Peace be with you always," before she had to add, "my poor weekend revolutionary brother." And that was that. When I looked back, she was already closed the door. So forgive me, Thimby, when now I can't seem for the life of me to remember very much of you than this anymore. Thank you so much.
That was Philip S. Bryant. And let's thank Philip again with our visual applause. Thank you, Philip. Our next reader is Connie Wanek, whose poems have appeared in Poetry, the Atlantic Monthly, the Virginia Quarterly Review, Great River Review, Poetry East, Waterstone, and many other publications. In 2006, U.S. Poet Laureate Ted Kooser named her a Witter-Binner Fellow of the Library of Congress. She served as co-editor with Joyce Sutphin and Tom Tamaro of the anthology To Sing Along the Way, Minnesota Women Poets from Pre-Territorial Days to the Present, from New Rivers Press in 2007. Wanek is the author of 4 books of poetry, a collection of short stories, and a forthcoming, I think it's actually out, children's book of poetry co-written with Ted Kooser. Wanek was deeply honored to receive the George Morrison Artist of the Year Award, which recognizes an artist whose body of work has made a significant contribution to the arts in northeastern Minnesota. In 2017, a wildflower trail in Duluth's Hartley Nature Center was named in her honor. Please join me in welcoming Connie Wanek.
Thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me to be on. Yes, we lived 25 years in Duluth, and now we're down in the cities, warming up, supposedly. So I too will begin with a spring poem, very hopeful, called April. And this is really April in Duluth, but today is very reminiscent of April in Duluth. When the snowbank dissolved, I found a comb and a muddy quarter. I found the corpse of that missing mitten, still clutching some snow. Then came snow with lightning, beauty with a temper, and sleet, the compromise that pleases no one, precipitation by committee. Out on Lake Superior, the worried ice paces up and down the shoreline, wearing itself out. Chimneys have given up smoking. In the balcony of the woods, a soprano with feathers. And upon the creek, the wicked spell is broken. You are free to be water now. You are free to go. This next poem is it's called Long Nights. It starts with an epigraph by Robert Bly. It's good to have poems that begin with T and end with God. He said that in one of his poems, and I thought, okay, I'm going to try writing a poem that begins with T and ends with God, if it's good. And it turned out to be about motherhood, and specifically about my mother. A cup forgotten on the windowsill, half full of cold tea, half of moonlight. The rocking chair sits alone now, its back erect and its seat ample. There I nursed the first baby and read the Alexandria Quartet, wherein a child was a further romance. I still feel her in my arms, limp with sleep, and see her heartbeat in her fontanelle. Whenever I tried to lay her in her crib, her eyes flew open. Let her cry, they said, but I never let her cry. My mother carried 6 of us, one after the other, on her hip, as we descended from her embrace to our stations on the earth. She says to this day, her left hip is higher, her left arm brutally strong, her right infinitely dexterous. Long were the nights she spent in labor, wrestling babies from the Creator. This next poem is one I don't know if I've ever read out loud. I had an idea that I would write poems based on postcards that I received, and so I wrote one. That was the end. But it was a good idea. This is called Postcard, Busy Clarencetown Harbor on Mailboat Day. So a friend of mine was down in the Caribbean and sent me a postcard. Bahamas, 1962. She liked to always pick an old postcard and send it. So Bahamas, 1962. The red truck idles, dropping an unknown fluid into its shadow. The sky is full of the sea, of clouds that left the salt of their estate behind in the rich water. At night, we feel the anchor drag and the whole island drift toward the Southern Cross. But the morning mailboat finds the dock, and dark heads bend over fluttering paper as the inquisitive breeze reads over a dozen shoulders. Love is everywhere, like the sand. Whatever is old is still to be loved. Whatever rusts, whatever falls behind on the sandy road, the oldest hen, the pencil stub, is still to be cared for. At noon, the mail boat, low in the water, restarts its engines. Our last words must be weightless. I wrote some poems also really about my parents, but based mostly on my mom, called the Mrs. God poem. So it started out as a description of my parents, and then the whole idea, the whole project got a life of its own and went on and on. But this was the original poem, Mrs. God, and it's really a pretty accurate portrait of my parents. Mrs. God, someone had to do the dirty work, spading the garden, moving mountains, keeping the darkness out of the light. And she took every imperfection personally. Mr. Big Ideas, sure, but someone had to run the numbers. Then talk about babies. He never imagined so many. That was part of his charm, of course, his frank amazement at consequences. The pretty songs he gave the finches, those spoke to his innocence, his ability to regard every moment as fresh. Let's give them free will and see what happens, he said, ever the optimist. So this is a Mrs. God poem that was too late for the little book of Mrs. God poems that I published. It's called For a Change. Earth had become a job that required constant customer support. Humans didn't seem to understand the basics of their service. Mrs. God suggested a standard message when people first connected. The kingdom of God is within you. Honestly, I think it gives them a sense of agency, she said. But God thought the problem stemmed from a confusing owner's manual. Some of these translations are inscrutable, he said, paging through the dense instructions. What about a series of drawings where steps would be illustrated with a puzzled little angel, sort of like IKEA? And of course, an extensive FAQ on the website. It's worth a try, said Mrs. God. The most important thing is that people know they're getting accurate information. For a change, said God. Okay, so this poem is called Toll Road. We were just on the road for a while and went onto yet another toll road. One around Denver, Colorado. You know that one. Toll road. You will pay and pay and pay, said all the signs. It's not a road for the poor or patient. Time is money, is distance. The triangle flattened to a long straight line across the rolling land from star to star. We don't talk about free days. What free days? Since Eden, it's been handfuls of change. Once, when I was a young girl walking off my nerves, a car of boys slowed and rolled down the windows to throw a clatter of pennies at me. That's how rich they felt, I guess, how generous. I didn't marry money, but we've saved enough to leave some along the way at the window where a man shows us his empty palm. A wooden arm lifts, then, and on we go. I'm a big gardener, and I can hardly wait to get back into the dirt. Usually you can by now, at least, for peas, kale, maybe a few potatoes, but it's really been miserable. So this poem is called Cabbage Moth, and the gardeners among you will be familiar with the cabbage moth, which is that little white moth with a black dot on its wing, and it lays eggs on the broccoli, so that unless you're very careful, you'll be eating tiny little green worms with your broccoli. It's extra protein. Cabbage moth. I'm suddenly aware that the air is crowded with small wings. I have something to protect now. The greens I tucked in, telling them a story. Once there was a garden where to live, nothing required the death of anything else, where even the fragile were fearless. We had just one infinite language that sounded like Mozart sung by a cabbage. To learn it, you only had to breathe. How to master the wind is every moss spring obsession. How to leave one's eggs affixed to the perfect underleaf. The dark spot on each white wing is evidence of an entirely different life that's over, that succeeded before this troubled one began. And I just wanted to say that, yes, this book, Marshmallow Clouds, this is what it's called, by Ted Kuzer and me, is now, in fact, a reality. And it has these really gorgeous pictures. One of the things I really like is that if you take the jacket off, you still get the picture. Don't you like that? When you take the jacket off, still got a picture. So I'm going to read just one poem from this, and from this children's book. And first I'm going to show you the illustration, because the illustrations are really, really gorgeous. I hope you can see that. It's just really beautiful. The pictures were done by an artist in England named Richard Jones. And they're just really, it's really super fun to see your poems illustrated. I have to recommend it. Anyway, this one's called Tadpole, and this is my last poem. Tadpole. Why think frog? Why not enjoy the tadpole just as it appears? A huge comma, soft and black. It doesn't smear in a water droplet, so maybe it's been shaped with a dull Sharpie, permanent ink, perhaps by someone just learning to draw, someone who has to try another and another until the golden pool is full of swimming tadpoles, the liveliest of all punctuation. Thanks so very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Connie. That was Connie Wanek. Let's give her another round of visual applause here. Thank you, Connie. Our next reader is William Norine, who studied law and music, holds a BS from the University of Minnesota, an MM from the New England Conservatory, and a J.D. cum laude from Boston College, where he was a presidential scholar. While teaching at Berklee College of Music, he was named a Massachusetts Artist Fellow. He's been a professional jazz drummer and composer, a Boston cab driver, a Wall Street lawyer, and thrice elected district attorney. His poems have appeared in the Kansas Quarterly, Candelabrum, The Lyric, Kamaru, The Advocate, Co-Review, GW Review, Aileron, Mankato Poetry Review, Cornerstone, Rockford Review, Midwest Poetry, William and Mary Review, The Cafe Review, The Pacific Review, Half Tones to Jubilee, Amherst Review, Plain Songs, Aura, Cape Rock, The Orion, the Nassau Review, Best Poem of the Year Award 2005, Poem, Red Cedar, The Willow Review, Avalon, Caveat Lector, Chiron, Concho River Review, and The Alembic. And other journals? Wow. Let's welcome William Norine.
Thank you. Thank you. They're all little journals. Can you hear me? Okay. And I'm very pleased to be in such, what we say in music, heavy company, very esteemed company. I have a few, am I done at 8:30, by the way? Is that, or do I?
No, you get your 15 minutes of reading time.
All right. Okay. So I have a few winter poems I felt I'd move to read today. The first one is called Listening to Christmas Carols on Interstate 94 Midwinter. And its epigraph is, "The holly has a blossom as white as any star." White freeway. I'm watching how the floating snow makes patterns on the windshield glass. Watching how the large, exquisite flakes jewel to melting almost with regret. So slow to glow, they blend together in a wash of mist to wipe away with another dwindling year. They tell us nothing's lost, it only changes form. Why then do we miss things so? Dad, is that your winsome call in flight above the lonesome snow, swirling in the winter woods and trees of 60 years ago? Do you discern these carols in some midnight clear? Each passing day, I'm closer to the truth, yet see only from a weary distance or darkly through a windshield glass. If only I could make things out, bridge that transit between faith and sight. On a darkening hill, a twinkling tower bulb, red as holly, slowly blinks its light. This next little suite, if you will, is from a sequence of mine called Around Our House. And the first poem from this sequence is called Soaps. And I begin with an epigraph from Philip Larkin. Where has it gone, the lifetime? Search me. Another sunny day alone in the empty house where I grew up, where the days go by like blinks of an eye. Mom and Dad gone 30 years, just yesterday in the race of time. The ghosts here, if any ghosts there are, haunt in zenith monochrome, in the aura of sun blue Clorox, and cleaners with names like Cheer and Joy. It was here where Mom would faithfully follow her soaps, while Dad feigned sleep in his chair. The titles of her daytime stories could caption poems. The Guiding Light, Search for Tomorrow, The Secret Storm, The Edge of Night, and yes, The Young and the Restless. Terms not synonymous, you see. For the old are the restless ones, like me, for whom it's ever more true each swiftly passing year. Like sands through the hourglass, so are the days of our lives. A couple more winter poems. To make you curious, this is At a Winter Window number 2. I'm not reading number 1. The curtains frame the gray street, the glass window, a dark portal, dim blank slate of the imagination. This wind that whips the pane could almost speak, could almost say that somewhere words and phrases have no meaning. Somewhere, steeped in the forlorn blue shadows, is an almost unbearable snow sadness. A gray winter afternoon, the life comes down to leafing through old papers. Yellow photographs, rejection slips, letters from the dead. Rambling through the records of my being and what's reflected there. Desire for what might have been. Friends lost forever, near things, insults, slings and arrows, outrageous fortune. We're going to get out of the house pretty soon. One more poem. This is called Internet Love Poem number 1. This is the age of cyberspace, when one can fall in love with pixels on a screen, as I have done. They say that I don't really know you, but the eye is the window of the soul, and yours glimmer in electric light. Oh, I've walked about the village in the night and ambled through the dark and quiet streets, looking in at windows, dropping my head as strangers shuffle by. Others in the years long past have walked this way as well, have heard their icy footsteps echo in the silence of this all too real world. They could only face the dire elements, but I can hurry home to you, to the warmth and fire of my room, and open virtual windows of the soul and heart where we commune together, each safe from the world and from each other, 1,000 miles apart. One more poem in the house, then we go out of the house. This is called Her Shoes. Alone and scuffling in haste, you are too small cubby box of a closet, barely big enough to hold our clothes. Quite suddenly I see a shiny pair of high-heeled shoes, neatly in line on the floor, hidden beneath the shirts and coats, alone and huddled together and forgotten like a spurned couple at a cocktail party. Her shoes, old but never used. Shoes for dressing up, a shine and slender to fit her slender feet. Hopeful shoes, as she was when she bought them. Where? Saks? Or one of those glamorous perfumed rooms at Macy's. They sit by themselves, forgotten and disused, long out of sight and mind, like childhood dreams. Cinderella shoes that hearken to well-heeled men who might have told her life is short. Best come with me. I can take care of you. But like so many, she made one big mistake, and having done so stayed, hugging her bad bargain the tighter. Few my dalliances, my change of jobs every year or so, starting over 10 miles back from where we started last. The journey becoming ever more her destiny. I shudder slightly at all I've held for granted, as if these shoes could not be filled, turn sharply on their heels, and stroll right out of here together to seek the bigger world with her and claim the life she's missed. Now we go outside of the house, finally. This is called AD 2018. And this, last night I walked the summer woods alone in darkness. The fallen leaves along the trail were ashen in the bright moonlight. And the Halloween trees bleached bones beneath the sky were like a nameless legend of the dead that framed a briar pathway for the soul. Never could I have walked between them without discernment, without real faith, without a word of wisdom. Eternity is a moment that lasts forever. I have two more poems. This is a poem that actually appeared up in Hayward, Wisconsin as part of the Paper to Wall exhibit, where we had a poem, which is one of my poems, and then a painting, an oil painting of the poem. It was a wonderful exhibit and up in Sawyer County, Wisconsin. And this is called At a Certain Couple's Grave in Grantsburg. Isn't this cheery? And I was standing on the grave. I like cemeteries. I do. It's history, and it makes you think. I want to speak to you, sir, about love, in whispers only, beneath these heavy trees. About how you took your life when you lost your wife of 40 years. Now, we can quarrel about what love is, its incalculable essence, how it rises sometimes in the throat to choke speech, to stop our very breath, or takes us up beyond ourselves, or leaves us empty, parched, like dry grass by a rotting lake in summer. The frogs and creakings of your farm grew loud without her. It was just no good. There were those who judged. But is it a sin to love too much, to admit of losses that cannot be borne? And finally, I have a poem, and I have to say, I suspect my being here is more due to the generosity and largesse of my friend Richard Terrill than my poetic accomplishments, but I'm glad to be here nonetheless. And I think Dick, I call him Dick because we're old friends, would think me a little amiss if I didn't read a music poem. So I'm going to close with a music poem, and from my own personal experience. It's called Miroslav Vitus. And Miroslav Vitus is one of the great jazz bassists of all time. He's part of the original Weather Report and an idol of mine while I was an undergraduate music student at the University of Minnesota, having worn out the grooves on his album, Mountain in the Clouds. And what follows is utterly true personal history. It's called Miroslav Vitus. My funky studio off Como, shared bathroom down the hall, single bed in a dormer, gray window, the filthy pigeons roosting. Here I first heard Mountain in the Clouds, stressed it out on my practice pads, my tin fake cymbal draped with a towel. At night the birds hooted, cooed, and booed at my feverish dreams of distant places. But waking up again in Minneapolis, I was haunted again by the angelic face on the album cover. Years later on stage at Pooh's Pub in Boston, that same face a foot away from mine as I bristled and strove on my Zildjian ride to keep up with his furious up-tempo pace, thinking in extremis, I can, while he attacked with fury his upright bass. 45 minutes without a pause that ended with his crisp and only words to me. You play good, man. Thank you. Thank you. This was a joy. And that's what I've got. I did time mine, so I don't know if I came in short or long, but thank you. Okay.
Great. Thank you for the music, William. That was William Norine. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight and invite you to our May 12th Midstream reading, which will feature the poets Mimi Jennings, Stephen Clausen, Lee Collin Thomas, and Ann Piper. That will be on May 12th at 7:30, and also it will be online. So I want to thank again our Zoom master, Paul Mattis, who controls the readings and does such a good and faithful job in bringing this to all of us. And then I'm going to invite you, after I read the names of our poets tonight, Paul, if you will unmute, and then we will thank them verbally, vocally, visually. I don't know if we can get any other senses in over Zoom, but we want to thank our readers tonight: Mary Jo Thompson, Philip S. Bryant, Connie Wanek, and William Norine. Thank you very much, all.